So in 1999, I was a rambunctious 11-year-old.
I was 11 years old.
I was 11.
I was about 10 years old.
I was a whopping 9 years old.
I was 9 years old, fourth grade.
I was in 7th grade.
I was in 5th grade in Miss Howard's class up in Syracuse, New York.
1999? I don't remember what I did yesterday. How could I tell you 1999?
Running around shirtless at a pool picking up trash.
In 1999, I started Spear Physical Therapy. When I was in college, if you went to my locker room and you opened the locker, you would have all these gadgets fall out. You would have strength shoes that had this waffle on my toes that was supposed to get you to be faster. If you looked at my helmet, you'd see that the inner flap was painted white with this opaque white paint because I had researched and read that color would bring more light to the retina so you could see the ball easier. You know, I was crazy. Like I did all these different things. And so it was easy to make that leap from trying to gain peak performance for myself to doing that for others. So it was very aligned with my personality and who I already was.
After I graduated, I played squash in college. I took a job as a squash professional. I was playing professional tournament, like doubles tournaments and whatnot, having the time of my life. At the same time, my father was dying of cancer and passed away that Memorial Day weekend. And literally on his deathbed, he said to me, please fulfill your journey to physical therapy. Make sure that you go to school and get that graduate degree and make a career out of it. And I took it to heart, even though I was having such a good time as a squash pro and I was, hitting that ball every day and just having a blast. I reapplied to one school, Toro College, forgot I even applied, and finally got in. I remembered my father's voice telling me that I better go, so I enrolled and off I went.
I didn't get back to my dorm until about 4:30 in the morning. And I get back to my dorm, and on my voicemail is a message from my sister. She had left like 5 messages, Danny, you gotta come home, call me right away. Dad's in the hospital. And so I call her and I'm like, what's going on? And she was like, you gotta come home, Dad's in the hospital. And I was like, well, I had like a formal to go to. And I was like, oh, can I just come on Monday after this thing? She was like, no, you don't understand. You need to get on the next bus home. My uncle picked me up from the subway. I was in Brooklyn, the Sheepshead Bay stop. And he's telling me that my dad's probably not gonna make it. He had a brain aneurysm. And I remember just like in that moment looking at the rear view, or looking at the mirror on the side of the car, and it says, objects may be closer than they appear. And it was like describing everything that was happening, like everything I was hearing, like nothing was making sense. And I never saw my dad alive again. I went to the hospital, right to the hospital, and that was it. So my life changed on a dime. And I got back to school after a couple weeks, and I remember walking in, and it was a festival atmosphere. There was like it was called Newing Navy. It was people were running into the lake, seeing how many peanut butter sandwiches you could shove in your mouth, that kind of stuff, and it was like surreal because I walked back into a world that was like so different from where I was. I actually had a nice 2 weeks, and then the school year ended, went home back to reality, and then sophomore year was pretty challenging because I really was a totally different person. When you lose your father young, again, we didn't plan this in any way, shape, or form, but there is a loss, an emotional loss, but there's also a loss of support and a feeling of you've gotta make it on your own and do what you have to do to be successful and do it in a positive way. I think we all shared that. I think we all shared a combination of that maturity of knowing what life is about, the ups and downs, but also being able to look through that lens positively. Not be victims to anything, but to look through it positively and gain strength around knowing what life is really about, what's important. So maybe it helped us know what's important in life a little earlier than we would have otherwise. When I was graduating from physical therapy school, I was also recruited to play baseball in Europe by the Swiss. They paid for me to fly over to Zurich. I played a season with them. I was in the European Cup tournaments. Got Best Hitter Award in the Cup tournament. Throw that in there. And anyway, when I got back, the physical therapy, the National PT Magazine did a story on me. And I got a phone call from a fellow physical therapist who was in New Jersey. And he said, I know you don't know who I am, but I read the article about you, and I wanted to see if you wanted to play on my semi-pro team. And it was in Long Island. I said, okay, sure. And so I got to know this guy, and he had a private practice. He was very generous and said, why don't you come take a look and see what it looks like. And so I went to his practice in New Jersey, and honestly, I said, gosh, if this guy can do it, why can't I? And that's when I began to conceptualize spear physical therapy.
My plan was to go to the Sydney Olympics and try and volunteer as a physical therapist, because I had done that at the Atlanta Olympics while I was in physical therapy school, and it was the greatest experience of my life for the Paralympics. So I was there for 2 weeks working with the Paralympians, and on a voluntary basis. I couldn't treat the patients because I was in school, but I was with the physical therapist. I was on the track and field venue. I was at the pool and watching people with unbelievable disabilities doing things that you didn't think was possible. So my dream was to do this in Sydney and actually work with the Paralympians there. And I was going to stay in Australia and surf for a little while, tour that part of the world, maybe New Zealand, and my plan was to come home, move to Colorado, and be a physical therapy / ski bum. And that was my intention.
I was a valet parker. I was the valet parking manager, let me put it better, for weddings at a catering hall. And I worked a wedding, and in the kitchen was a waiter named Dave, and we looked at each other and we said, aren't we in PT class together? It was like the first week of school. And that's how we became great friends. We met at someone else's wedding, and we were both working at the wedding.
Dan and I sat next to each other pretty much every single day through 3 years of physical therapy school, barring our clinical affiliations. We were very, very close. We had very similar backgrounds growing up. We were both very athletic. We both played baseball, and we both lost our fathers very young. Fairly right after I lost my father at 21. I think Dan was 19 or 20 when he lost his father. So I think both of us took over as kind of the paternal person of our families and really had to take on that role full-fledged. So there were so many similarities between the two of us, and we spent, not only in school, we spent all of our time outside of school together as well. He would stay at my apartment numerous nights. We'd study all night for tests. We just had a great time and always had this very strong connection. Dan called me up one day and had this idea of starting a practice. And we were very, very close, and it just seemed like a great idea. I knew of a person who owned a personal training gym, who happened to have a large space with 2 rooms that were deemed for physical therapy or some kind of health-related field. They were using the rooms as storage closets. So we knew there was an opportunity to potentially get space. So I saw this opportunity, and I knew Dan was the right person to do it with, and that kind of changed my whole thought process and my whole future plan.
We had dinner, and I remember it was at a Mexican restaurant. I think it was on the Upper East Side. It was definitely uptown. And I said, Dave, do you want to start a practice together? And he said, yeah, great idea. He was into it. He wasn't sure if he was going to move to Colorado or not. I know that was part of the equation. But I do remember when I posed it to him, and it was over a margarita and some chips and salsa. Dave had known a person that owned a personal training gym, and we went to cut a deal with them. We met with this individual who was an ex-CFL football player, and sort of type A kind of guy. We didn't cut any deal, but we met him and we thought this could work. And then that week, I belonged to Equinox, the gym. I still do. And they had a speaker from Lenox Hill, orthopedist from Lenox Hill, talking about ski conditioning injuries. And I said, Dave, why don't we go? I was always very high tech, and the techie thing to do in 1999 was print your own business cards. So I went to Staples and I got the business cards and I printed up business cards that said SPEAR Physical Therapy. SPEAR was Sports Performance Enhancement and Rehabilitation. I just thought of it. And I lived on the Upper East Side and Dave lived on the Upper West Side. So I just put our home addresses on these cards. Now, we don't have a location yet. But we go and we listen to the doctor speak about ski conditioning injuries. And then after he's done, we wait for him, we approach him and tell him we're two young physical therapists starting a private practice. And he was intrigued. I didn't expect him to be so excited, but he had a big smile on his face. He said, great, I need some guys I can trust. Do you have any business cards? And so I look at Dave and I kind of give him a wink and I give him my business card. Dave gives him his. And like I said, we had no location there. And he looks at it, these cards, like back and forth. He's like, this is terrific, 2 locations. And that's how we got our first patient. He sent a patient to us that weekend. I got a phone call.
Literally a few days after, we get a phone call from a patient named Vito. And Vito wants to come in for physical therapy on Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever day it was March 22nd, 1999. And we didn't have a facility to even treat the patient. And that's when I remembered this space on 55th and Lexington. So we very quickly spoke with my friend and the owners. We worked out a deal with them to come into the space. We cleared out one of the storage rooms. We set up a little computer in the room. We had a treatment table, and Dan and I rock, paper, scissored who was gonna treat Vito that first day, and that's when Spear was born. Oh, I won, Dan had to treat. Yeah.
So when we first started, we would do everything from treat the patient to book the next appointment to verify insurance, submit to their insurance company, try to collect a copay, try to collect from the insurance company, try to meet their doctor who referred them so that we could develop a relationship and create collateral, marketing pieces, everything. So it was actually so fun to me that I was doing so many different things and involved in so many different aspects of what it means to have a business, including negotiating leases, including negotiating with the personal training gym, who quickly became, I'll call it a little bit envious of our growth. They didn't expect us to grow that much, and so there was some friction there. And until we got our own space, that caused a lot of stress. We were in that space for 4 years, and when we moved just around the corner, that was on the postcards, to our new location, all of a sudden we grew 35% that year. And I realized because there was so much mind share going into figuring out how to coexist with another company that there were friction points with. So once that was out of the way and we could just focus on what we do and what we do great, all of a sudden we started to grow at a much more rapid rate. We had a photo shoot. It was done on 55th and Lex, and we had a few patients in there. One was this former college football player. It was an Ivy League player who was a wide receiver. His name was Key. He was one of our early patients. So we had him. We had Dave's mother-in-law who was posing as a patient for this, and then it was Dave and I. And yeah, if you look, we still have those photos that show the Dave and I, you know, not knowing what was ahead of us, still green, still wet behind the ears, and beautiful things have come out of that initial beginning.
We worked hard for many years and long hours, and we just grinded it out. We didn't know anything about physical therapy. We didn't know if we were going to make any money. Like, how to even get reimbursed by an insurance company. Didn't know how to get on an insurance company. So we literally just started treating patients, not knowing whether it would work out or not, or whether we were going to get paid for it or whatnot. But we loved it.
I had a friend on that baseball team that I talked about. His name was Joe, and he was a designer, and he gave me probably 15 different logos, different shades, different colors, and we went through all the different colors, and I kind of liked this earth tone color. You could actually see it right here. This was the reddish family that just felt earthy to me of that first logo. And so it was really like this beige and tan, and that was the Spear logo. And when we did a refresh just a few years ago, it was, I wanted to keep an element from the past. And so that element, it's the A in Spear, this aspirational A that's just pointing up. And you have on one side is that sort of like earthy, beige feel color that's a nod to the past. And then you have on the other side this sort of sky blue future of where we're headed. And in the middle is this nexus that combines both, and that's where the magic happens. And that's how we sort of went from our old logo to our new logo. And it was very exciting for me. Well, I think there's a big evolution even from myself personally, where I was, how do I have an impact on people's lives? And is it the patients on my schedule, which I can influence maybe 10, 12 people a day, or is there a way to broaden that out? And I think in the roles that I took as this went on, it was sort of like a who moved my cheese. And by focusing on building a brand and building a company that can really have a greater reach than just my own 12 patients a day, I think that was very rewarding and a new mindset for me.
I called Dan from Chicago. It was a cold call. I remember calling the front desk saying, I need to speak to the owner. There was a patient that recommended me, and the front desk person got Dan on the phone, and he said, who are you and what are you looking to do? And I said, well, my name's Ryan, and I'm looking to move to New York, and I'd like to become a partner in your physical therapy practice and open up some centers. And he's like, well, let's pump the brakes a little. Let's get to know each other first, and why don't you come in for an interview? And that was really my entryway into the company. And I remember flying to New York and meeting with Dan and Dave, and kind of laid out what I was looking for. I was really looking for an organization that met my values and become part of the culture, but I always had this entrepreneurial spirit, and I wanted to become a partner and open up another location. And the challenge, they said, was, if you can go out and find physicians that support you, that we would love to give you the tools and resources, and really explore the opportunity of opening up a Spear location. And that's what I did. So every day, during my lunch, after work, I'd meet physicians, and within about a year, I met a couple of physicians that were really sending me a lot of patients, and I found some real estate, and I approached Dan and Dave about opening up another location under the Spear umbrella over in our 44th Street office, and they supported it, and I became the clinical director, and that's how we opened up our second Spear location.
The most important responsibility that I have to this company is hiring A players.
I really don't think I would be where I am right now, professionally or personally, without joining Spear.
We talk a lot about Spear having this great culture, and we're not lying about that.
I think what made me fall in love with Spear was, I think just like spending like each week, each month with like a group of people that were really invested in growing personally and professionally.
Just the energy of the clinic, I think from the very beginning, it was infectious. You could tell that the people working there had such great relationships with each other. And I think that's what really sold me on Spear.
I think the thing I like about Spear the most is that, we're able to get personal with each other. We ask our each other about our weekends, about our personal lives, and I think it just creates really that family bond that I look for specifically in my location, and I know others do as well.
I was looking for a company that was going to invest in me as much as I was going to invest in it. And from day one, from the people I met here, I knew that that's what was going to happen. They were welcoming, they were friendly. It was like I was joining a family. And that feeling, I just didn't feel that anywhere else that I had ever been to in the physical therapy world. It's definitely unique, and it sets us apart from everything else that's out there. And it's really that sense of investment in their teams and getting their people to continue to grow and learn that really made me want to come here.